Hi everyone, and welcome back to MIAC's Artist and Scholar Dialogue series, where MIAC staff and curators are speaking with different artists and scholars about their work, the impact the pandemic has had on their practice, and just what they've been up to in the past several months. My name is Lilia McEnany, and I'm a curatorial assistant at the museum. And today we're going to be speaking with Kathy Whitman-Elk Woman, a stone and metal sculptor, painter, jeweler, and just overall fabulous artist and designer. But before we start talking with Kathy, I'd like to briefly acknowledge the place where this conversation is happening, at least on my end, and even though we are in a virtual space, in Ogopoge within the Tewa world. As a non-native person living in so-called Santa Fe, I am a guest in the ancestral homelands of the Pueblo people, and I wish to acknowledge all of the native folks, past, present, and future, who walk on these lands. So thank you, Kathy, for joining us. I'm so excited to be able to chat with you today. So just to get started, maybe for those of the viewers who might not know you, why don't we start with a brief introduction, who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
I'm from the Fort Berthold Reservation in North Dakota. It is the three affiliated tribes. It's Mandan-Hidatsa-Arikara, or more correctly, it's Hidatsa and Sanish. But we've been together since the early 1800s, and my Indian name, which was given to me in a ceremony, is Elk Woman, or Marogawiya in Hidatsa, and my clan is Dripping Dirt, which is Awache. That's how you say it. So my father was Mandan-Hidatsa-Arikara, or Hidatsa and Sanish, but everybody is usually enrolled under one specific tribe. So although I'm of all three, I'm more Mandan, so I'm enrolled under Mandan. And then my mother's Norwegian, or was Norwegian, thus the blue eyes. So I grew up on my reservation in North Dakota. That's on the Missouri River.
Wow. So can you tell us a little bit about your artistic practice? I know you do like a million different things.
Oh yeah. Well, I think I kind of don't know where to begin. I mean, I grew up in the country. I'm just going to give you a little background. We had no telephone. We had no TV. The reception, we didn't have any good reception because we lived in we call it coulee, kind of a little valley in North Dakota. And so we didn't have good reception. And in those days, I don't know, I guess probably they didn't want to put phones out or whatnot. Anyway, I grew up with the radio and records, and growing up in the country, you just become creative. I feel like, because I went to country school up until I was a fifth grader. It was a little tiny one room schoolhouse, and a reservation school. And it was just a day school, but we did a lot of arts and crafts there. And so when I was home, I did a lot of arts and crafts. I mean, just being creative and making up stuff. I used to draw paper dolls and draw clothes for them, and I think you hone your creative skills when you don't have very much, and so that's how I grew up. And then I used to draw a lot. And so when I first got married, I just started painting on my own, and I started painting with oil paints and just taught myself. And then it evolved into, I think as a native person, just for me anyway, growing up on the res, I used to dance at powwows, and I have 5 kids, and we used to go to the powwows and we would dance. And of course, I'd make my outfit, I'd make their outfits, and I think, being from the Northern Plains anyway, you just do it, you make the outfits, you learn to bead, you just learn how to do all that stuff to be more self-reliant, I guess. And so I always did. I sewed and did all that stuff anyway. So fast forward again, then, so after I was painting and stuff, and after I got divorced, I think when you're creative or you want to do stuff, there's not just one media or medium that you want to work with. For me anyway, I like to explore all kind of options. And so I went from painting, which I still do, but I went into stone sculpture, and then metal, welding, steel. And then I also work with, you just evolve. And I started working with recycled materials because cans, aluminum cans more specifically, because I wanted to do something. I mean, after I'd been doing this for almost 30 years, you kind of, you get to a point, I feel like, that I wanted to anyway. Even though my themes were about living in balance and harmony with Mother Earth, and taking care of Mother Earth, all along, that was my themes. But I just felt like that I needed to do something more to be the difference, not just put an idea out there, but really be the difference. So then I started making jewelry out of aluminum cans. And then that didn't, although they're good sellers, they don't have the impact as far as the message. So then I started making realistic sculptures out of cans, because then people, then it seemed like then they take you more seriously about being able to use recycled materials to make something beautiful, But as Indigenous people, or even, I think, if you go all the way back, everybody goes back to their roots, they'll see that they were all resilient, and they weren't wasteful, and they used whatever they could, whatever they used every part of anything. And, they always found a way. They weren't wasteful, but because we've become a throwaway society and we have this abundance, we don't value things so much, Anyway, I was trying to put that message out there. So I do that too. But I think that my latest thing that I've been kind of dabbling in is forging steel knives and swords.
Very cool.
I'm just a real beginning stage and novice at it, but I just like exploring, I don't know. And I like that, that's kind of what pushed me into the stone, because it was so male dominated, and I thought, why? There's no reason for that. It's just kind of a stigma, I feel like, and I wanted to break down those walls. And so I did. And I kind of feel like that about forging. Not to say that there's none, but no women in it, but it's not common like it is for men,
That's fabulous. I definitely want to hear more about the forging. But I think your point about the innovation in material and just the idea of making it work is such a quintessential thing about Native art. And you said, like, Native resilience as expressed through all of these different mediums. And I think that's just so interesting. And especially when you're talking about recycled materials and aluminum cans and being that change, I think that's so interesting. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about your process in terms of working with these recycled materials to make both sculptures and jewelry. What is working with, I assume, must be a difficult material. What is that like for you?
Which one?
Like
aluminum?
Yeah.
Well, when I first started it, my intention was I started saving cans, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. My intention was to do origami, because I thought, oh, this would be so cool. But aluminum cans are super thin. They're paper thin. And I cut them open like for a sheet. But if you fold them one way, you can't fold them back the other way, because they'll just break. They'll just split, So that didn't work. And so I just kind of played with the idea. I started doing cutouts. I started doing like kind of fabricating, making round, or, making little birds, and trying to work with the material, so it wouldn't break. It's super easy to cut. You can just cut it with a scissor, because it's so thin. And I just experimented, and it evolved over time. Then I kind of found that thing about being self-sufficient, or what's the word? I think, I can't even think of it. Anyway, the thing was, though, you know, you just find a way, and because it's, you to take time to cut all these things out, and then you have the aluminum material, recycled material, and people can't justify paying a large amount of money for this little piece of jewelry that the material is not worth hardly anything, you know, but all the time and effort that you put into it, people don't get it if they're not a kind of a person that creates things, you know. So my point about it is just that, not being able to charge very much for it or justify the, you know, money for it. So I started looking at easier ways to cut it or to create things, and so I discovered in like Michael's or Home Depot, not Home Depot, Hobby Lobby, they have all the scrapbooking material, and so you can use a lot of those tools from scrapbooking. Punches, you know, they have butterfly punches and all these different kind of punches, and it will cut out aluminum.
I never would have thought that would work.
I know, but I figured, you know, it's so easy to cut. Let me see if this works, you know, and it did. I mean, a lot of times you wear them out though and dull them, you know. I mean, they're not lasting on aluminum, but it's not that expensive either, you know, so you can buy a new one. Right. I have so many different kind of punches.
That's very cool.
Wow. Yeah, that's just an idea. But so then when I started doing my sculptures, I fabricate them with the cans, you know. I'll use whole cans, or I might smash them up like the inside. So the whole armature is cans also, because I just wanted to do the whole thing, you know. I mean, that was the whole point of it. And then I would cover it, I mean, after I get a form, and then to start smoothing it out or putting definition in it, I started using round discs, you know, cutting out round circles, because you can contour them more, you know, and so they can lay nicer on there than to just be flat. So it's all trial and error, you know. I mean, that's how I like to do that kind of stuff anyway. I like to find my own way in there, you know.
Yeah. And that just must be such a huge contrast between working with stone. And I think a lot of people maybe know you for your stone sculptures, just not fragile. So, I mean,
yeah,
really interesting to kind of go back and forth between stone and then this very fragile aluminum.
Yeah, it is. I mean, in even doing big outdoor steel sculptures, you know, I mean, there's such a contrast with all of it. And silver work. I mean, I'm a silversmith too. So it's so strange, because the thing is, they inspire each other, you know, because what I can do in a big sculpture, you know, I might be able to do in a little piece of jewelry, you know, with the silver. The material might be a little bit different, or even in the aluminum, you know, there are some similarities, but I feel like they all kind of inspire each other, you know. But because it's been my living for over 35 years, you know, doing artwork solely, I can't just work in one medium for a period of time, you know. You get kind of burnt out, or you feel like, you know, okay, I've done everything in this material, I don't know what else to do with it. And you're not inspired anymore. I'm not. So then I got to switch up. And then if I go to something else, I mean, I do clothing too. And I did that a lot, probably 10 years ago, with leather, you know, that I did in shows and such. I had stuff in the Cowboy and Indian magazine, I don't know, probably close to 10 years ago. Anyway, I kind of tapered off on that, you know. I really enjoyed it, but clothing is the thing about clothing is you have to have sizes, you know. It's not like jewelry or earrings or a necklace where you can sell it, or a piece of artwork that you can sell. It doesn't have to fit, although I love all the aspects of fashion and clothes and hats, you know, and shoes. But anyway, I'm kind of getting back into that again. I'm and I got inspired by some other younger native designers, because they're mass producing their designs,
And we're at such an interesting moment with Native fashion too. It's like really,
Yeah,
and there are so many incredible designers, and
right.
kind of moving past the small frame of Native fashion and just moving into fashion. And
Yeah,
really exciting.
yeah, yeah. I know. I always like that too. Um, Purses and vests, those are, or kind of a wrap. Those are easier to sell than, I mean, but that, if you don't have to have too much size wise, if you're doing one of a kind, that's, a hard. So that's why I kind of got away from it. But yeah, I mean, and the art, all the women that I know that are doing that, Native women that I know that are doing different designs, I mean, doing their own designs on clothing, where they're able to mass produce them. They're all different, which I love, and mine is different, so it's great, even though, I mean, even though they're all different tribes, a lot of times Northern Plains tribes, we have similar designs or similar clothings. I mean, that stems back from the beginning of time, because we traded so much with each other and we traveled so much within the tribes, and we always had gatherings, and we interchanged, beadwork, quill work, shells, and I mean, so much was changed, not just our clothing designs and styles, but I mean, medicines, all kinds of things, so Northern Plains, and probably a lot of the plains that go down in the, like to the Southern Plains, there is a lot of exchange there, because I guess because we have a lot of similar social dances as compared to the Southwest tribes. Although powwows are big now in the Southwest, they didn't used to be. When I was in high school, they weren't, which was many years ago. I'm just saying, it was just the Northern Plains thing. Anyway, I got off track there.
That was great. So I really like this idea that you said about how all of your mediums kind of inspire each other. And I think
Yeah.
that's so interesting, especially when we're talking about fashion now, but previously you mentioned like bladesmithing. So can you talk maybe a little bit about how your other mediums have inspired your new work in forging and knives and swords, and kind of talk me through what's going on there?
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm just barely, doing it, but uh I'm still messing with the idea. I mean, the knives that I made so far are, I mean, I just made a couple knives, and then I made a kind of a, I don't even know what you want to call it. It is a almost looks like a Japanese blade, the end of it. Yeah. So it was, things that I've just been trying out, but I think the one thing that has inspired me from my traditional arts, or all my other arts, is I etched on the steel designs, like floral designs or lightning, or geometric designs, which I did it on the steel, and then I've also done it on the handle on the wood, So I'm anxious to get into it more, because I'm just starting. So I haven't really, the thing about forging and even making the handle, I mean, it's so totally different than what I've done. It kind of is similar to when you're forming silver, except that, you heat it and pound it and heat it and pound it, shaping it. But steel is, you have to heat it up really hot, and it cools down fast. I mean, when you want to pound it, it's a lot of physical work. I mean, really physical.
And it seems like too, making like keeping the blade straight would be really difficult. I mean, I don't really know much about this, but it seems like that would be one of the hardest parts.
I know. And I've watched a lot of Forged in Fire.
That show, yeah.
But and then I really wanted to do forging prior to that, so I just watch it and just soak it all up. But then once I started forging, I'm like, and then watching the show, it's like they're not even telling you you know, you think that they're giving you a lot of details on that show. Well, they're not. Because I was like, you know, like the part I had to do research a lot too as I'm doing it. I'm going on YouTube. How do you do this? How do you do that? You know, when you're heating it up. I mean, that thing about keeping it straight, and the other thing is hardening it, you know, and sticking it in oil or water. I mean, you know, like all how all those things make a difference, you know, the molecular structure and all that. I don't know. I don't understand all that. So I'm really trial and error still.
So is this something that you got into because of the pandemic? I know I've talked to a lot of folks who have kind of ventured into new mediums this year. Is that
No,
no?
I started that last fall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got the forge last summer, actually. Not this past summer, but the summer before the pandemic happened. So I started experimenting prior, but then I had a big project, so I put that aside because I had three 9-foot metal and stone sculptures that I had, that were they were supposed to be done in June, so I had to put my forging aside and do those pieces.
Yeah. Wow. It sounds like a huge project.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that project and what it was?
Yeah, it's there are 3 chiefs from my reservation, from my tribes, the 3 tribes, and one is Forebears. He's Nuita Mandan. Matodopa is the Indian name, is how you say Forebears. And then there's Bladesmithing, who's 2 ravens, and he's Sanish. I mean, he's Hidatsa. And then there's Son of Star, who is Sanish or Arikara. And my tribe built interpretive center, and they've been working on it all year. And of course, because of COVID, it really slowed down. You know, their crew got smaller, but they had commissioned me to do this last year. You know, so before all this happened, and thank God it continued. They already had the money earmarked for me. I was a little iffy about that for a minute, you know, you guys still got your money anyway, or my money, you know. And so I finished those pieces. I did the faces out of marble, Portuguese marble. And so the faces were probably about this big, super heavy. And then the rest was all steel. And I used Corten steel on the outside. That's a steel that only rusts to a certain degree, and then it stops. It kind of becomes like a protective coat, so it doesn't rust away, you know. And so they are on my Facebook page, the Kathy Whitman Facebook page. I have an artist page, but I can't be posting on. I'm lucky if I get it posted on one, or they're on Instagram too under Elk Woman. Anyway,
it's so hard to keep up with all the different types.
Especially, you're creating and then try to do the marketing end of it. It's not good.
And now with everything, obviously moving online, and with Swaya online, and I assume the herd will probably be online. It's a huge change, and I'm wondering how you found navigating all of that.
Well, I don't know if we talked about that earlier, but the ironic thing is since, like I was saying, I've been doing this for 35 years. I mean, I've been in Indian market since 1987. So that's a long time. I mean, I know there's people that probably been there longer than me, but, and doing the herd, and I just really, how can I put it nicely? I just got burnt out and tired of doing shows. I mean, market shows, because I don't know. It always feels like the past several years, I get tired of sitting in my booth. It just feels like a wasted time and sitting there, and then I like engaging with people that are sincerely interested, in how to do the work or whatever, the work. And but I get tired of the people that are ignorant. Let's just put it that way. And that's never ending.
Definitely. At least you have a barrier with the internet.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's like, yeah, with the internet, when you sell things online, you don't, either they're going to like it or they're not going to like it. And you don't have to listen to some BS. Either they'll value it or not. And I just got to that point too, that I don't need to prove myself to you. I don't need to tell you why it's important or good or whatever, anyway, I got tired of it. And I just decided after Indian Market last year, it's been kind of happening with me over the years, but because I've been in that habit of doing shows, and I come from that old school of that you have to do shows in order to survive, that it was hard for me to pull out, even though I could have pulled out probably a good 5 years ago. I mean, where I was really done. After the show, I don't want to do this again, but then I'd come back and do it again, But I decided last summer, not this past summer, but 2019, that was it. I wasn't going to do any more shows. And so I never applied for, when the application first came out for Market, I didn't apply. And it was kind of scary, in a way, because you're just so ingrained in that whole way of thinking that I said, nope, you know what it is, just stop. Excuse me. And the same with the herd and the other shows that I do, I just decided wasn't going to do it anymore. And so, and then COVID hit, and then everything went virtual. And I just thought, this is so crazy, but for me, I mean, I don't know if you want to put this out there either, but it baffles me to think why people would pay a booth fee to be online. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. So, yeah.
So clearly you've been working in Native art most of your life, and that this larger world of Native art that spans like from the shows into the museums and the collectors. And I'm just wondering, as someone who's been in all of this for so long, in the midst of the pandemic, where do you see all of this moving in any of these realms? I know it's a huge question.
I know. Well, I always think, I mean, when I hear those kind of questions like that, especially about into the future, what do you see down the road or whatever? And I kind of said that to you before. I've never been one to think like that. It's here now, right here, in this moment. This is maybe today, tomorrow, maybe next week. You can ask me what I'm doing next week or what I think is going to happen next week. So I really, I've never been one to think in the future. I've always been in, I think because I raised my kids by myself on my artwork. And so it's always been now, providing month to month pretty much, and doing whatever I had to do just on a really day-to-day basis kind of, I know that's a weird, to me, that's the norm. But when I tell other people, or even like people in my family, like some of my siblings, I mean, I remember my brother saying to me one time, that he just doesn't know how I do it. He's like, I got to hand it to you because, you have 5 kids and you're providing for them all and you live like this. You don't have a steady paycheck, you don't have a salary coming in. This is not anything you can count on. I don't know how you do that because I couldn't do it. I mean, has a degree in education and in music and in art, but his way of life and living is to have that security, and that steady paycheck. And and it seemed funny to me because I am me and I live this way and I don't think much of it until somebody says something like that to me, then I'm like, huh, oh, I guess that is kind of odd, um, but being an artist, that's, I mean, gosh, my whole thinking is, I guess that, I don't know how to say it. My work that I do and the medium all the media that I work with, it all comes from the earth, whether it's steel or silver, or, whether it's fabricated, the aluminum, it all comes from the earth, all of the elements in it come from there. So I've felt like this since I started doing my artwork. I mean, as an adult, I guess, that if I respect it and honor it and pray about it, before I'm going to work and I smudge, I everything's alive to me. And I feel that when you take care of those things, when you acknowledge them, and when you have respect and reverence for them and treat them in a good way, they're going to treat you the same way back. That there's reciprocity in that. I don't do it for that reason. I do it because I feel so grateful to those things, to those elements that help me, that I create with. And I am so grateful to be able to do it. And I love doing artwork, and so I'm grateful to those spirits of all those things. And I just feel like when you live that way, or when you treat things that way, it's going to take care of you. It's like how they say, however, like long time ago before cars or whatever, however you take care of your horse, it's going to take care of you that way too. Same way with your vehicles, however you take care of your vehicle, that's how it's going to take care of you. You know what I mean? So to me, it works that way with the artwork, with the media that I work with, and so where I was going with that is just that that it always provides for me, and it's always provided for my family. I mean, there's been a lot of times it's been pretty tough, and scary, like, where's my next month's rent gonna come from, or there's that element in it. And I think a lot of artists, I mean, I know a lot of my friends just from shows, and we discuss things like that, like, oh my God, I barely got to the show, or it's crazy stuff. But I mean, when we say we're broke, we're broke. It's not like you got a savings in some, or CDs or whatever. Anyway, my whole point is, it's a crazy way of life. I think, I don't know how artists are now, but in my day, I mean, I should say my peers from, back before in the 80s and 90s and such, and probably up to now, but there's, more opportunity, like the media, the internet and such. But I think that, we're not generally, I'm generalizing here, but we're not like accountants, and not everybody has, PR people or marketing people, and, all that kind of stuff. So I think a lot of times we live from, how do they say that? I don't know, month to month, on hand to mouth, kind of a thing. But what was your question about where it was going? So my whole point was just to give you that background, because I've never thought that far down the road, other than maybe like in the 90s, I think it was more so. It kind of tapered off, but I used to do a lot of gallery shows. There was a lot of gallery shows type. That was a big thing, just like markets, So I used to go to different parts of the country where I had different galleries that represented me. There was Chicago and Washington, D.C. and New York City and in Phoenix and some in California. Anyway, there was all those things, but so I would go do those shows, but they paid for everything. The galleries provided for you to come out there and place to stay, and your sales usually had guaranteed. I mean, they didn't guarantee you sales, but you had sales. Otherwise, what's the point, So that was probably as far as I planned, you know, and so as far as where it's going, I have a son that's an artist too, and he does it. I mean, he does it full time too. He, out of my 5 kids, he's the only one, and that's Chinupa Haska Luger. He's a ceramic artist. And so he grew up.
I interviewed him a few weeks ago.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so he grew up that way, you know, but he's totally different in his thinking, and the other thing is he learned how he didn't want to be, you know, from the way that I had to deal, and the other thing is, you know, breaking down barriers. I mean, we had to depend on my age group, like in the 80s and 90s, to really break into it. You had to have galleries, you had to do shows, you had to win ribbons, you know, you had to get collectors to see you, you know. But the big thing was galleries, and of course galleries, you know, they help you, but at the same time they take a big huge chunk, you know. They help advertise for you, they have a client, all that kind of stuff. But it's so different today, you know. I mean, not that they don't have galleries today, but they're not, the younger artists that are up, you know, that from where my son came from, they were breaking down walls and having their own gallery. You know, they had this humble, which those guys inspired me, you know, his age group inspired me. Like, you're right, we don't need to depend on these galleries that can treat you really, there can be really condescending to you, you know. I mean, I've had my share of that kind of, you know, mentality from galleries. So I think it's really headed in a good direction as far as art. I should say, and my son and I have had these talks, you know, about where I came from, as far as culturally, spiritually, and where he is. And he grew up with more knowledge than I grew up with, and more participation than I grew up with. But he grew up with it because I engaged in it, you know, and I wanted my kids to be more involved and to have a better understanding of all of that. Whereas my dad grew up in boarding school, you know, and I probably don't even have to say any more than that, you know. So that played a big, huge, it was a big, huge detriment to our people and our culture and our language, all those things, you know. So in my generation, then we sought to get that back, you know. Anyway, I feel like they're might be more aware. His age group might be more aware. I know, but it's kind of meshing too, you know, my age group and the younger ones, as far as I don't know, that they're more aware, and they're not afraid to put messages out there, you know, in their artwork. I see that more so with my son. I mean, I know the other ones are like that too in his age group and such, but I'm real proud that he stands up for our beliefs more than, you know, in his work, in your face kind of thing.
Serious issues in really incredible ways. He's doing really important work.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that answer. I feel like that was just very genuine and honest. And I think kind of the core of at least what I heard, was the importance of having reciprocal relationships, whether it's with your materials or with your art or with your community and your family. And I think that's just such an important message in the wake of this year.
Yeah, that's true.
And maybe living their life a little more intentionally, and thinking about reciprocity and relationships. So
yeah, I mean, I learned that a long time ago, you know, but it is good to see that there is a different path than to be chasing the dollar, whether, you know, even in the art world, you know, trying to get ahead, that was the other thing that really kind of reawakened me about shows, is that, you know, that whole thing about getting ribbons, winning prizes for recognition. And and boiling down to making money, you know, get yourself out there, get yourself known, da 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 da. But what was been wearing on me the past several years too is that it just pits us against each other, you know, and that is so bad. You know, it should be about unity, but it's like you want to outdo this person or you want to outdo this person. I remember one time somebody saying that to me, another sculptor. It might have been, she might have meant a compliment. I don't know, but it was that thing of that she can't wait till she can beat me, you know. And it was that thing where you're kind of like,
Right.
what?
Yeah.
Thank you. Or, you know, I mean, it's insulting. It made me feel bad. You know what I mean? And that's kind of a good example of that. You know, you should do work because you love to do it and you want to explore it there, you know, try new things, but not because you want to win a ribbon or beat somebody, you know, that. And again, my son, not all his friends are like that, like he is, but he absolutely didn't want to participate in Indian market. Absolutely not. Just, and he didn't have to, you know, and so he never had to compete. I mean, he never, you know, had to go in there and compete, put his work against other people to be better than or less than or whatever. And I think that is really a big, I think that's a big thing, you know, because it never influenced his work, which I've seen so much of that, especially probably in the 80s and 90s. I mean, seeing people copy people or, you know, whatever won that one year is going to win, then, you know, just following trends instead of following your heart, you know, and your intuition.
Yeah.
That, I don't know, it's been a lot of learning, just evolution, I guess, you know.
Yeah. And I think that evolution and that, I mean, staying true to yourself and what you want your art to look like, I think that's very apparent in your work and throughout the phases of your work that you're just kind of doing what you need to do. And
thank you.
And it's fantastic. And yeah. So to wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to chat to MIAC audiences about?
I don't know. Every time you ask me something, I go off on a tangent. So I don't know. I think I've covered everything.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, thank you, Kathy. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk, and thank you everybody for watching.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.